Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through some Week 9 IDP waiver wire pickups.
Hike!
All right, Joe, in this episode, we're going to be talking about 5 players, but you could be in a deep league or not so deep league in IDP. So we're going to give you some players that are more heavily rostered if you are in a league that has not as many starters, and those who aren't as rostered if you have a deeper league. So first player we're going to be talking about here is the rookie edge rusher, Jared Verse of the LA Rams. Had a great game against the Vikings, Joe. Had 1.5 sacks, 2 assisted tackles, a solo tackle, a tackle for loss, and 3 QB hits. He's doing pretty well in that department. What are your thoughts on Verse, Joe? How much are you spending for him? He's 68% rostered.
Yeah, I definitely am interested in Jared Verse. He had a pretty impressive performance, against the Vikings on Thursday night, as you mentioned. Especially with the 1.5 sacks. I mean, he's got back-to-back good games, and it seems like can take rookies a little bit of time to find their footing and do well. It seems like he's getting there, and like you said, he's getting to the quarterback, getting those quarterback hits. I think sacks will continue to come. We know that's kind of a sticky stat, and guys don't always get those, but the fact that he's pressuring the quarterback around the quarterback, I think those will come and you'll be to your benefit later here. So I think as far as how much I'd spend for him, I'd say around the 5% mark, I think would be good. I do think he's a pretty good ad and somebody you at least, keep on your roster and maybe, play in a really good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say anywhere from 5 to 10% for him. Right now, I mean, he's doing very well. Like you talked about, Joe, sacks are not the best metric to look at. He has 12 QB hits on the year, which is tied for 7th for the most amount of QB hits in the NFL. So although he only has 2.5 sacks, you shouldn't just be stuck on that number. He's getting pressure. He's getting in there to affect the quarterback. So he's obviously the guy, in my opinion, that you'd want in the LA Rams D-line room. He led the team in snaps as far as the defensive line goes with 84% of snaps, 42 snaps. So for me, I like Verse a lot. He's a guy who I was really excited about. Feel good, kind of take a victory lap here. He was a guy who he was my top edge rusher coming in the class, and he's been far and away the best guy so far.
Yeah, he's been really powerful with his bull rush. I'd be curious to see if he continues to add in the other moves, but he's really been pushing a lot of guys around. And, it impressed me too. Like he was getting it done even against Christian Darrisaw while he was in there, but then obviously he really continued to eat once the backup left tackle came into that game.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So next player we're going to be talking about in more shallow leagues is defensive end edge rusher Gregory Rousseau. Greg Rousseau has been on a tear, honestly, in this past month, Joe. But he had 3 QB hits, I believe, 3 solo tackles, 2 tackles for loss, assist tackle, and a QB hit, or 3 QB hits, excuse me. As far as our scoring goes, he's been doing very, very well. And he's rostered in 62% of leagues. And they got Von Miller coming back, I believe, next week here. So what are your thoughts on Greg Rousseau, Joe? You spent up to get him.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Von Miller, do you think that actually helps or hurts him? I mean, these past
Could
2
hurt
weeks,
him. Could hurt him based on the rotation.
I was just wondering that because, I mean, see, the last 2 weeks has been his 2 best weeks on the season. With our scoring over, 20 points, close to the 30-point mark. But obviously those games are without Von Miller and that rotation. So that's why I was curious to see if you think that actually helps or hurts his value.
It could hurt. Also could help. He could get more sacks. I mean, he's top 10 right now, tied for solo tackles. He's also in the top 10 for QB hits. So he's definitely making his presence known. So he's a guy who, in my opinion, I probably would rather have Verse. I think Verse has a higher sack potential than Rousseau, even though Rousseau actually has more sacks on the year. But you really could go either way. I think both of them are worth 5 to 10%, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I'd probably, go stick around the 5% mark for Rousseau as well. I do think he's interesting. Watching the Bills games, you have continued to see him, in the backfield pressuring the quarterback if he's not getting those sacks. So I mean, I do think he is worth an ad, and given the right matchup, I think you could potentially start him as well.
Well, and he had 2 pass deflections as well. But he played just 75% of the snaps, 38 snaps overall. Epinesa played 34. But they're not as deep as they once were. I mean, they've been playing a lot of Dewan Smoot. So I wonder if when Von Miller comes back, does Smoot kind of take a back seat?
Yeah, he probably would have just. And you'd be curious to see how much they want to even utilize Von Miller as well to this point, coming off of the injury, if they'd want to give him a high percentage of snaps anyways.
Exactly. So the next player we're going to be talking about in shallow leagues, it's going to be a linebacker. Josey Jewell just came back from an injury. He's been out here for a few weeks now, 3 to be precise. He had 4 assisted tackles, 6 solo tackles, and a tackle for loss playing his old team, the Denver Broncos. Joe, I think Josey Jewell only rostered in 51% of leagues. I think possibly due to the injury, people were looking to cut bait with the guy. But I think he's a good player to have. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's shown that he's a good player to have. I mean, he's got a couple of games on the year where he's got double-digit tackles, this past week, and then also against the Chargers. So I definitely think he is somebody to definitely add, and he's somebody that you can play, especially because I think the linebackers for the Carolina has been valuable, but their run defense hasn't been the best. So a lot of teams are running against him, which is going to get him a lot of opportunities to come and make the tackles. He's not a really guy that's gonna offer a lot in terms of the passing game. He's not really a coverage guy, but as far as going downhill and playing in the run game, that's his strength. So I do think he's a solid ad to have, and then a guy you could potentially play as well as long as he's healthy and out there.
Not to mention, too, I mean, he played 100% of the snaps. So he just
Yeah.
came back from injury. He played all the snaps. I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they don't really have other, a notable linebacker to play outside of him at this
No.
point. So, we saw, how valuable a guy like Frankie Louvu was, in that same role at Carolina as far as IDP goes. And Josey Jewell, has already had good games and valuable games for IDP already.
So the next player we're going to be talking about, we're going to be shifting more to deeper leagues. So if you're in a shallow league, you only have to play a few IDP stars. This guy is not for you, but in a deeper league, I think it could make sense. And that's defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. Joe, I know you're not the biggest fan of him over the course of his career. In the most recent game against the Broncos, he had 4 assisted tackles, solo tackles, and a tackle for loss, no sacks. So you could say he didn't have that great of a game, but I anticipate that he will be traded. More than likely the Panthers are mailing it in here. They're in a rebuild stage. And we saw what Clowney was able to do last year with Baltimore. Was able to get 9.5 sacks, played really well. So I still think he's got some gas left in the tank here. So I think Clowney could make some sense. I probably wouldn't spend all that much for him. He's never been a high sack guy, more tackle floor, probably 2 to 5%. In deeper leagues, and in shallow leagues, I wouldn't bother going for him. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I could see it in a deeper league. I mean, you know how I feel about Clowney. I'm probably not that much, that interested in him. But depending on the team he does go to, he maybe becomes more interesting. I mean, at Carolina, they're kind of a dumpster fire. They're not playing with leads. It's going to be hard for him to get sacks. I mean, obviously, he's only got 1 on the season, but he had a decent amount of tackles against the Broncos in the run game. He played the run pretty well. So, I mean, his tackle floor definitely helped. But if he does go on a contender, starts playing with leads, maybe he can be a little more aggressive and start getting the sack number. So I could see the intrigue, but I'm not looking probably, maybe the 1 to 3% range, just a speculative kind of add to stash on your bench. But I'm not actively trying to seek this guy out and prioritize him heavily.
Well, honestly, and I'm actually surprised we're not talking about him because he could have been an ad. But you think of a guy like Josh Uche, right? Really didn't get a lot of, I'd say, involvement in the Patriots defensive line. Now he's traded the Chiefs. Now he still has to get ahead of Felix Anudike-Uzomah. You know that for sure.
Shouldn't be that hard.
Well, we know Karlaftis is going to be on the one side. They
Yeah.
also got Michael Dana as well. I don't know if Uche will just be a rotational player or can he play the whole time, but he's a guy definitely to monitor, see how he does. But basically, the point of the Clowney went to the Chiefs that could change not the Chiefs in particular, but a team like the Chiefs could make a big difference.
Yeah, no, I think definitely as far as Uche goes, he's now a lot more interesting. I mean, anytime you can get a play with a guy like Chris Jones to wreak havoc in the inside for you to kind of force the quarterback back and potentially get into the lane of those edge rushers, I mean, his value for sure increased.
So last player we're going to be talking about here in deeper leagues is defensive tackle Jer'Zhan Newton, the rookie. Now, for most, you probably are wondering who, because he's not a household name, but he is a good player. We thought that he was going to be a first-round player. Joe ended up slipping into the second round due to some injury concerns. But if you don't follow the injury report, you may didn't think about this guy. But the reality is Jonathan Allen, I believe, is out for the year. I think it was a bicep injury. So now Newton is the starter next to Daron Payne. He had a fumble recovery, 3 stole tackles, a tackle for loss, 3 QB hits. So in his first game, truly as like the guy, he played very, very well. He's the future for the Commanders. So and he has that pass rushing ability. That is one of the reasons why I know you and I both liked him coming out of college. So I think he's a guy in deeper leagues and defensive tackle required leagues. I'd be spending at least 10% for the guy. I know it's pretty high, but I think the Commanders' defense, he should do quite well.
Yeah, I just was double checking there. You are correct. Jonathan Allen is undergoing surgery for a torn pectoral, putting him out for the season. So I agree with you. I would be spending up on Jer'Zhan Newton. And, it was nice to see. I was watching that Commanders game there, paying attention, and I saw his name flashing and making a lot of plays. And like you mentioned, you and I were both excited about this guy. Thought he was going to be drafted higher. Thought he could be an impact player, go into a great spot. Just the question was he going to be able to get that playing time? But now that Jonathan Allen's hurt, his role is going to be there. And still, with a defensive-minded head coach like Dan Quinn that he has, he's in a good system. So I think, with the guaranteed playing time moving forward, he's going to be a force and a really good playable defensive tackle.
Well, the thing, too, is he played ahead of Phidarian Mathis, which I thought was also very promising, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, I believe it was former second-round pick. So, they drafted him earlier. I think now, mind you, it's not the same regime, right? Now Dan Quinn's the head coach, different general manager, and Adam Peters. So, different philosophy going on there. But you saw Newton jump Phidarian Mathis, who's been healthy, I believe, all year or most of the year. So if you look at the snap count, which I think is very hopeful for him, he played 35 snaps, 56% of the snaps. Daron Payne played 49, which is 78%, which makes sense. Payne is the starter, but Newton's going to be right next to him. And at the end of the day, I think that Newton has better pass rush moves than Payne. So I think that'll actually help Newton because he's got Payne next to him.
Yeah, I'd like to see, Newton to continue to get more tackles. I mean, he seems to be pretty consistent with 3 right now. But obviously, for our scoring sake, like he got the big points because he was able to get the fumble recovery. But if he didn't do that, then it would have been kind of disappointing. So as he gets acclimated and as the season goes on, I'd like to see him continue to increase his tackle floor.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about 5 players, a few in shallow leagues, a few in deeper leagues that you should go out and pick up in your IDP leagues. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.